In the last video, I discussed the history of Berkeley Square, pointing out that it's in one of the most prestigious areas in London. In this video, I'll talk a bit about what happens to the idea of Berkeley Square in a transition from Michael Arden's short story called When a Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square to the song of the same title. Now, I need to warn you at this point that according to Eric Maschwitz, who wrote the lyrics, the title was stolen from the short story, an anecdote that implies that Maschwitz wasn't really interested in representing the story in song form, but was simply inspired by a suggestive title. So we shouldn't expect a straightforward translation of story into song, but there is a connection there, and we'll want to think about what gets carried over, and we'll need to think a little bit about why the title was so suggestive. So let's begin with Michael Arden, who was a well-known essayist, playwright, novelist, and short story writer who was born in Armenia and found huge success when he was in his mid-20s in London. He was a dandyish figure who was very much a society man, always impeccably dressed and well-groomed, driving a yellow Rolls-Royce around the streets of London, which earned him the title of the English F. Scott Fitzgerald. He wrote with a quick, vivid, familiar style, full of wit and clever turn of phrase, partly in the style of G.K. Chesterton or George Bernard Shaw, but with elements of fantasy and horror threaded through. The story collection These Charming People, in which When a Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square appeared, was published in 1923 when Arden was 27. The connected stories in the collection introduce moments of horror into their descriptions of Mayfair, including introducing the figure of a gentleman crook. The title, These Charming People, then, was deeply ironic, suggesting a world of luxury and glamour that was disguising a sordid, but often quite banal malevolence beneath the surface. The story A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square focuses on the love triangle of the married couple Ralph and Joan Royalty and Hugo Carr, Ralph's best friend with whom Joan is having an affair. I won't spoil the plot for those who haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I really recommend that you do. But the important point now to emphasise is that the story takes place entirely in the drawing room of a house, midway on the side of Berkeley Square. The world evoked is one of gentlemen's clubs and golf, where servants come at the press of a button to wait on smartly dressed people in spacious, well-appointed and candlelit rooms. But the overwhelming atmosphere of the story is claustrophobic and one of unremitting boredom. The main characters are scheming to find a way out of their perfectly respectable, elegant lives. The story makes it clear that these are characters who are trapped inside their elegance, desperate to find a way out, to be free. Arden understands that luxury does not buy happiness. Wealth is not an antidote to boredom. Indeed, it seems to be the cause of it. This story of the boredom of well-appointed luxury is bookended by references to the nightingale that sang in Berkeley Square. In the opening, the story of the nightingale circulates as a kind of gossip. There is a tale that is told in London about a nightingale, how it did this and that, and finally, for no apparent reason, rested and sang in Berkeley Square, we're told. We're told that there are different schools of thought about whether this actually happened or not. Doubt is raised about its truthfulness because some people will say anything. The sobriety of the people who tell the story is also brought into question, but the key phrase here is that the nightingale sang for no apparent reason. It's a point that the story's ending also emphasises. A nightingale has never sang in Berkeley Square before, Arden writes, and may never sing there again, but if it does, it will probably mean something. This suggests that the imagery of the essentially rural nightingale singing in the centre of London should mean something. But in this case, it seems not to. It's just another symptom of the banal meaninglessness of existence in the world of privilege. So in the story's title, When a Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square, we have a symbol that seems like it should mean something, but in fact doesn't. It should tell us about the role of beauty in poetry and of song in the centre of metropolitan London, but in fact, it tells us nothing. What should be beautiful is in fact empty. But then, Eric Maschwitz picks up the book reads the title, finds the idea of the Nightingale singing in Berkeley Square to be a wonderfully romantic idea, and writes one of the most successful love songs of the 20th century about it, cementing Berkeley Square in the popular imagination as a beautiful, rustic retreat in the heart of the city. And this is the really surprising thing about the song, that it is fundamentally a romantic song that's based on a story that is all about the impossibility of romance. The song retains Arden's sense that this is an impossible collision of poetic beauty with urban scene, but here, instead of the deep cynicism of Arden's empty image, it becomes a powerful symbol of the magic that turns the world upside down when two lovers kiss.